Right, it's time for another tool review, so let's jump in and do it. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the workshop. Now, we have a tool review for you today and we're going to look at the Bosch GKT 55 Plunge saw. So I've had this tool now for a good few months. I've put it through its paces. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you will have seen me use this across multiple different projects through multiple different materials. So I think it's about time to give you my review or my opinion on this particular tool. I'm not going to get super in-depth into all the specs and we won't get into the weeds. We won't get too nerdy about this. I'll just go take you through some of the basic specs. We'll have a look at the track, show you what I like about it, show you what I don't like about it, and give you my experience of using this tool over the last few months. So without further ado, let's jump in and look at the saw itself. Okay, so the saw itself, let's just go through some of the basic specs. So the heart of this machine is its 1400 watt motor. This particular version is the 220 to 240 volt version. It's also available in 110, so if you're using it out on sites, get yourself the 110 version. I'm using it in my shop, so 220 is fine here. Like I say, it's 1400 watts, which is one of the reasons I went for this particular saw, because it's a couple of hundred watts more powerful than most of the other ones. So the Makita, the DeWalt and the Festool, it's slightly more powerful motor. It is a variable speed, so just on the side here you can adjust the RPM, the speed of the motor. Now, one thing I did notice when I first switched this on, it runs a little rough, so the motor has a very rough sound to it, but the saw is super precise and super smooth when cutting through materials. I thought there was an issue with the saw at first when I first bought it. So I took the blade off, remounted the blade, went through everything, and it just runs a little rough. It feels a little rough, sounds a little rough. Now, it is a single phase motor. Single phase motors can be kind of tricky to get to run smooth. They don't have a naturally rotating magnetic field, unlike three phase motors. So whatever way the windings are set up in this to get the power output and get the torque out of the motor, it just seems like it's running a little rough, but everything runs super smooth. So I'm not sure it's not everybody's experience with this saw, but it's certainly my experience with this saw. It just sounds a little rough when you run it, but like I say, the saw works absolutely perfectly. Right, let's run through the rest of the specs quite quickly then. So the blade itself, it's a 165mm blade with a 20mm bore mount. It has 48 teeth. And yeah, it's super silky smooth. I have yet to see any tear out or breakout with this blade. It gives an absolutely precise, clean cut, which is really, really good. Now the depth of cut at 90 degrees is 57mm, and all the way over, beveled over to 45 degrees, you have a 42mm depth of cut. So it's just over it's about 2 1/4 inches, yeah, at 90 degrees, and 1.65 inches at 45 degrees if you're interested in the imperial measurements. Now, changing the blade couldn't be simpler. Just pull up the handle, it locks straight down into place. Everything now is locked in place, including the blade. It's just an Allen wrench, Allen key here to remove the blade. Drop this guy back down and then you're ready to go again. So that's nice and handy. You can just flip that up and lock it in place and everything is locked there, and you have this little window which gives you access to the bore mount for the blade, which is really, really nice. And you have just the attachments here, or the screws here just to bevel it over, so you have 0 to 45 degrees, similar to most plunge saws, and you have the depth stop here, which I'll show you. I'll give you a little close-up of this now, because this is one thing that kind of annoys me about this saw. Okay, so here is our depth stop mechanism. Now this is one of the only gripes I have with this tool. It's quite annoying to use. So you have two settings. You switch this guy down when you're not using the track. That gives you your full depth of cut all the way down to 57mm, from 0 to 57. So you lose about 5mm with the thickness of the track out of the depth of cut. Not too big an issue there. It's the setting of this thing that really bugs me. So you can push it up. It has 1mm increments, but you can often just jump 5mm at a time. It's hard to be precise with it. And then it has a thumb paddle here that you press in to release it, to push it up and down, but it gets stuck. This thing is very, very hard to push in. You end up jumping 20mm. You're always struggling with it. And we are trying to eyeball it with your head down here, looking at the side, trying to check your depth. This thing is jumping all over the place. It's just a bit fiddly. It takes a lot of pressure to push in this tab. Now you can see it's stuck, and then it jumps on you like that. So it's just a little bit fiddly. A little bit of a redesign on this. You can, like I say, push it up without pushing in the tab. So you can click it up. If you could click that down without having to push in the tab, that'd be great. A little adjustment there, and it would be fine, but quite annoying to use. And like I say, it's one of my only gripes. A small thing, but it can be a bit annoying. Okay, so that's just some of the specs on this machine. So it has that big powerful 1400 watt motor, like I say, which is one of the reasons that I opted for this. It has plenty of power. And you guys, if you've been watching my channel, you've seen me cut through oak that's 2 inches thick and beech and stuff. No problem, buzzes right through it. So it has plenty of power. Although that motor does run a little bit on the rough side, I've noticed. And the depth stop is a little bit annoying to use. Other than that, I don't have any real gripes with this machine. Now, the machine itself is made by Mafell. It is identical to the Mafell MT55, I believe is the model number of that, so it's almost identical in every single way. Apart from the handle here, the Mafell doesn't have the handle, but the looks wise it's almost identical. It doesn't have a scoring cut, so if that's important to you, then the Mafell might be the one to go for. So the Mafell has a switch on it. When you switch it, it kicks the blade out slightly, gives you a scoring cut at a depth of 3 millimeters, and then you just click it back in. It brings it right back into the side of your track, and you cut through. So if you're doing veneered materials, like if you're doing a lot of worktop, if you're a kitchen guy, a kitchen fitter, and you do a lot of veneering, you might want a scoring cut. Now, I've yet to see this cause any splintering or tear out of anything that I've been cutting. So it's not been an issue for me, but if it is going to be an issue for you, if you are, like I say, a professional kitchen fitter or anything like that, and you're doing a lot of veneered materials, then maybe a scoring cut option might be something you might look for. This doesn't have it, but like I say, I haven't needed it so far. Now, another thing missing from this particular plunge saw is a riving knife. Now, if that's important to you, you might want to look at a different model. I think the Mafell does have a riving knife, and the Festival definitely has a riving knife. Now, it's not an issue if you're going through manufacturer cheat goods. I've yet to have an issue at all doing MDF plywood or OSB or anything like that. I did have an issue, however, on my latest project when I was cutting out the beech slabs, so the big thick live edge slabs. Live edge slabs, all that kind of stuff can have tension in the wood, so as soon as you cut into it, the cut can go to close, and that's exactly what happened with this. It locked onto the blade locked in place, and I had to wedge something into the back of the cut to keep the cut opening as I was going through it. So a riving knife there would have helped just to keep the blade a little bit free. So, and you can also get kickback without a riving knife, so it's something to be aware of. This one doesn't have a riving knife, but if you're doing a lot of sheet goods, you might not need one. So here is the kit that I bought with this particular saw. So it comes as part of a kit. You'll see it mostly sold complete with the tracks. You get a nice stackable Bosch box. It's kind of standard for most of the Bosch tools. And you get a really nice padded bag. I'll give you a close up of this now in a second, with two 1.6 meter tracks. Now the 1.6 meter tracks are standard for the Bosch. They are slightly bigger than everybody else's track that comes standard. So the Makita, the DeWalt and the Festival, they're all in around 1.4 meters, I think. Something like that. So you don't get much of an overhang over your 8x4 sheet. You do with these. I'll show you, set them up on the table now in a minute. And it's how these tracks are joined together, which I really love about the Bosch system. It's one of the reasons I actually went for this. I didn't want to be fiddling around with T-slots and bolts and all that nonsense. This has a nice cam system on this piece of metal that they come with. Pulls everything nice and straight and in line. And you literally have the tracks together in seconds. So let's have a look at the tracks. Okay, so here's the bag that it comes with, 1.6 meter padded bag, nice zip bag with little accessories pouch in it. It also comes with a strap, so you can, a shoulder strap if you need to hang it over your shoulder if you're carrying lots of stuff. Again, I have no need for use that. It gets used in my workshop, so I don't have much need for that. But if you're on a building site, you might find that handy if you're carrying this up apartment blocks or flights of stairs or something like that. Again, nice padded bag, so everything's nicely protected. You get the two tracks, so the 1.6 meter tracks. Now these are also available in half this size, so 800 millimeters as well, which I do intend to get, because one of the advantages of these being so big is also their disadvantages. When you're doing smaller cuts, it would be nice to have a small little section of track too. So I do intend to buy that. There's multiple accessories available for these as well, so you can get the one for the jigsaw attachment, and you also get the router attachment, which I also intend to get, so I can run my router along this track, which is very, very handy, and also the T-slot clamps as well that are standard on most tracks. Now the beauty of this system is this attachment system. I'll give you a demonstration of this now and you can see exactly how it works. Okay, so to join the tracks then, it couldn't be simpler. So you get on the end of each track these end guards. They just clip out just to help run the flex over so the flex doesn't bind, and also the hose for your dust extraction doesn't bind. So you just pop the two of them out. Then you have your joiner. Very, very easy. So this has 4 cam bolts which pushes against the edge of these tabs here. They push out and bulge out. You have a perfectly straight edge on this piece of metal. It's like a straight edge for all the world, and that keeps everything nice and lined. So just drop it into your track. Like so. Hopefully I'm keeping all this on camera now. So once that's in place, just line up your 2 tracks, shove it through, have your center point lined up with the center point of your 2 tracks. Just push your 2 tracks together, take your flathead screwdriver and just turn the cams. That forces this against the edge of the track, locks that in place. And by doing that then, it pulls the 2 tracks perfectly in line. Now, that took seconds to put that in. There's no bolts, there's no fiddling around. You're not using Allen wrenches or anything like that. You're not underneath your track trying to bolt stuff on, and it pulls it in line for you. So you don't even have to check. This thing is dead straight. That's super easy. And that to me is a major, major plus. Okay, so let me just demonstrate this for you. So I'm gonna have the camera set up down there. Hopefully I can capture this on camera. I'll loosen that up. I'll deliberately make the tracks crooked. So now hopefully you can see down along the line that those tracks are slightly out of line by a few degrees. And by the time you get to the end of a track, if it's 1 degree out, it's way out by the end. So all I gotta do is not even touch the track, just twist the cams, and now that has pulled everything back in line. So hopefully you can see down along that is perfectly straight. And to separate my tracks, it's just a case of loosen that up, slide that guy out of the way, and voila, you're away. So there you go, that's how the tracks are aligned and how they're locked together. Super simple, couldn't be easier. That's one of the biggest selling points for me for this particular system. That's one of the reasons why I went for this and the 1400 watt motor. That takes seconds and it pulls everything in line. There's no fidgeting, there's no fiddling underneath the tracks with bolts and T-slots and all that nonsense. Put the bar in, it's a good straight edge, tighten the cams and it pulls everything in line as I've demonstrated. Now the tracks also do have T-slots in the end of them, so if you want to use clamps you can do. They also have 2 rubber strips which makes them nice and grippy, so you can see they get a good grip on material. But if you're using them on shiny surfaces and stuff like that and you want to get that extra protection so the track doesn't kick off or slip on you, you can use them with the clamps as well, which is nice. They have the rubber guard on the side of them as well, or the anti-splinter guard that the blade runs along the side. So the first time you use your track, you will actually cut straight through that, so it's slightly wider in the blade, so you get a precision cut along your guard and it stays there again. And they are replaceable, I think, those guards as well as they wear out. So yeah, track system is pretty good. They're nicely made, good and strong, a little bit flexible over its length, so a little bit more flexible than the Makitas and the Bosches and stuff like that. But the nice thing about that is if you're using sheet materials across sawhorses and you get a slight dip in your sheet, your track can dip with the sheet material, which is nice. So, and they're rigid in where it counts, and that's laterally like this. So yeah, a very, very good system, and that's one of the biggest selling points for this track saw for me. Okay, using the saw with the track itself couldn't be simpler. So you just drop it in place, it locates really easily, and it's a real low friction base on this saw. So you can see just how easy it is to pull that and push that forward and back. Now you can lock it onto the track. You have an adjustment knob here and at the back that will stiffen everything down. It grips the track, just in case you're worried about kickback or anything like that. If you're cutting into, slightly tougher material, you might want a bit more stability, you can do that. Now, nice thing about the Bosch as well, you can see this black strip underneath here. If you remove that black strip, it makes this saw compatible with everybody else's track. So the Makita, the DeWalt, the Mafell and the Festool track, this will fit onto everybody else's track, but not everybody can use the Bosch track. So that's a nice little feature with the Bosch saw. You can use everybody's track if you pull out that black strip, which is nice. Okay, so I have it plugged in here now. I just want to give you a little listen to this motor, and you can see how rough it is on startup. So I'll give you a quick listen. So you can hear that kind of gravelly note. And then it smooths out as it gets up to speed. Now you often see this with grinders and stuff like that. When I first heard it, I thought it might have been the blade. Then I was worried it was bearings, but it's not. It runs perfectly smooth and cuts perfectly through. So it makes me think that it is actually the single phase motor. Single phase motors, like I said, don't have a naturally rotating magnetic field like you can get from 3-phase motors. So there's a bit of trickery involved. So they can run a little bit rough until they get up to speed. It's just how it works. It's just how you create that rotating magnetic field. I'm not going to get into all that now with a single phase motor. So once they're up to speed, they run perfectly smooth, but when they're starting up, they can be a little bit uneven. So I'm sure that's all it is, and it's not actually any issue, nothing to worry about there. Again, it's not bearings or the blade, it's just the single phase motors. They can be a little rough. So that's more or less it on the saw itself. There's not too much more to say about it. You guys will have seen me use this in plenty of videos. I'll roll in some clips of this actually being used, and you're going to see me use it in plenty more videos. Another little thing that kind of bothers me is the hose attachment. It's a little bit on the small size, depth-wise, so the hose does pop out every now and again. The flex as well. I know I've said this in a previous video, but set up an extension lead off to this side of the saw. It keeps the flex out of the way. There's nothing worse than when you're in the middle of a cut and your hose or your flex catches the end of the track, lifts it up or kicks it askew on you, and it ruins your cut. So always keep your flex out to one side and try and keep your hose for your dust extraction off to one side as well. That's the only gripe I have. A battery powered one of these would be actually fantastic to get rid of that cord. Mightn't be as powerful, but that's just one little thing. Other than that, absolutely fantastic saw, and I have no issues with it whatsoever. Now, why did I buy a track saw? I get this message a lot from you guys, and especially some of the newer guys starting out, asking what table saw should they buy. You can see I don't have a table saw. I got rid of my table saw. It took up too much space, and I just didn't need it. I wasn't getting the use out of it. And trying to tear down sheet materials on a table saw is an absolute pain unless you have got someone with you. You can't get the accurate cuts. The bigger the material, the smaller the tool. That's kind of the rule. So you can do small, precise work on a table saw, but when you're trying to rip down big sheets on your own, trying to carry like if you've got an inch 8x4 sheet, you try and carry that. The weight of that is, it's not too easy to maneuver around, but you get a super precise cut and you have your sheets ripped down to what you need in minutes. If you watched me make the whiskey room builds and you saw me make up my own wainscoting from the MDF board, I literally had all those boards ripped down in minutes. It was about 10 minutes per board. You wouldn't do that on a table saw, you wouldn't do it on your own, and the precision you can get from a track saw, I think, is far superior to your table saw, especially over big cuts and larger sheet goods. That's why I have it. I don't have a table saw, I don't have a need for a table saw. My track saw does everything with my miter saw and my bandsaw. I'm covered. Now I can hear some of you guys say, but John, what about dado stacks and dado blades in your table saw? Well, what about them? I have a router table and a router that will do the same job, and you can also get a router attachment that sits on this track, which I've ordered, and you'll see that in an upcoming video. So you can put this on any sheet material and run your router in a super accurate fashion, no matter how big the sheet is. Try and do a dado in an 8x4 sheet on your own on your table saw. You'll see exactly what I mean. I know loads of guys starting out, as I did, thought I had to have a table saw. It has to be the center of my workshop. But as soon as I took an 8x4 sheet to my table saw, I could see where all the problems lie, and I literally don't need one now. But if you do need one, that's your mileage. I'm not saying don't get a table saw. By all means, if you feel you need a table saw, go out and get yourself a table saw. But I would certainly look at a track saw first. First off, you can do a lot more with it. It's very versatile. It's very, very easy, like I said, to rip down sheet materials, especially if you're on your own, you don't have help, and you don't have a big panel saw. Then this will do the job of a panel saw, and it does it in minutes, and it's very, very easy to use, and it saves the back as well. So that's why I got it, and that's why I have a track saw and not a table saw. So there we go, guys. That has been my review of the Bosch GKT 55 GCE plunge saw with its track system. So just to sum it up again, reasons I went for it: 1400 watt motor, good depth of cut, plenty of power. The tracks that come with it as standard are 1.6 meters, so they're good and big. It comes with tons of accessories. The tracks are super simple to put together, pull themselves straight. There's no messing about there. That's worth its weight in gold. And like I say, it performs really well, gives you a super, super clean cut with that blade that comes with it as standard. Nice and easy blade changes. It does everything I needed to do. I don't need a table saw when I have this. Now, what I don't like about it, like I said again, the depth stop is super fiddly. I don't like that. It's a little bit annoying to use. The motor does run a little bit rough on startup. The hose attachment is not great. It also sticks out the side, so it's not super flat here. So if you were using this on, say, cutting floors, you want to get close into the wall. That kind of prevents you there. I think the Festool is a super flat-sided one, so this one actually protrudes a little bit. So that's another little disadvantage. It hasn't been for me yet, because I don't use it in that application. It's perfect in my workshop. But yeah, there you go, guys. If you're in the market for a track saw or plunge saw, definitely consider this one. It's not the cheapest on the market by any stretch of the imagination, but it is good. Good tools are worth their weight in gold, and they eventually pay for themselves over time. And with that track system and all the accessories available for it, I think this is one of the best options to go for. With the power ratio and the track system, like I said, it seems to me to be a no-brainer. And yeah, if you're in the market for one and you're thinking about maybe getting a table saw, well, have a look at a track saw first. And if you're doing kitchen fitting and all that kind of stuff, and you're actually looking for an actual track saw, then definitely take a look at the Bosch. It comes recommended in my book. Again, no riving knife, so that's something to think about, and it doesn't have a pre-scoring cut, so you might need that. Like I say, if you are a professional kitchen fitter, you might need that. But it fits onto everybody else's track, which is nice. Just remove the black strip and away you go. So there you go, guys. The Bosch GCE or GKT 55. Now, I'm not paid or sponsored or anything. I bought this with my own money. This is just my opinion. This is my mileage. This is how I've used the tool over the last number of months, and it's just my opinion. Your opinion may differ, and I'm not sponsored, and this is not paid for. That's bought with my own money. So that's for what it's worth. Okay, guys, there we go. I'm going to get out of here now. I shall see you in the next one.